and welcome to our election panel on policing. This is one of three panels we'll be doing leading up to the municipal election on Monday, October 24th. The other two will be about housing and transit. First, let me introduce the panelists. We have Michael Kempa, a criminology professor at the University of Ottawa. Hello, Michael.
Hi there.
We have Robin Brown, the co-lead of the 613-819 Black Hub. Hi, Robin.
Hi.
And we have Brigitte Pellerin, an Ottawa citizen columnist and author.
Hi.
Hi, Brigitte.
Hi.
So first, to jump right into it, Brigitte, you've interviewed the frontrunners in the election, and based on what the candidates have been saying, how important does it appear to you that they think policing and public safety more broadly are for voters?
Thanks for the question. Actually, only one of the candidates really spoke at length about that, but I would say that's no indication of how important it is in this campaign. I just want to make that clear because he's getting a lot of flack for his perceived stance on safety as related only or primarily to police issues. And as far as I can tell, that's not true. But I also want to say that the other candidates very much feel that safety is a very basic and strong issue for voters, as indeed it is. Everybody in the city has a right to feel, is entitled to feel that they are safe, and not just, again, safe from crime. We have very little crime in Ottawa. Trust me, I travel a lot. This is a very safe city. It's not for everyone, not 100% of the time, and we have a right to feel that we are mostly safe in our city, and that is important for every one of the voters. Every voter, but also every one of the candidates. It's how they go about ensuring that safety is something that we can all enjoy, that you find the differences between the candidates, and also what they consider to be part of safety. For instance, safety from hunger. Is that also part of the general sense of safety? So I'm just going to leave that there here, but this question is a lot wider. Safety is a lot wider question than just policing.
Robin, do you want to expand on that at all? Do you have any thoughts on that issue?
Just from having watched all the debates on Rogers TV and having attended a couple of the mayor's debates, policing is to them, they see it as an important issue, but not a top issue like housing, transit, taxes, and the environment. And it also seems clear that the section of the public that they're thinking about when they talk about policing aren't members of marginalized groups, because no candidate talked about police making marginalized people feel unsafe. And this is despite the report that was released in April this year by the University of Ottawa's criminology department that found that racialized and low-income Ottawa residents have extremely low trust levels in the Ottawa police. In fact, the report stated, quote, "In short, for many people in the city, police do not contribute to individual or community safety. In fact, they appear to do the very opposite," unquote. And this is also despite the fact that none of them mentioned the use of force race data that the Ottawa police released earlier this year that showed that the Ottawa police are using force disproportionately on Black, Middle Eastern, and Indigenous people. So they're kind of talking to a specific audience.
Just to jump in there, I can add, building on Brigitte and Robin's points, the future of policing in Ottawa, the writing is on the wall. We've been mandated by the province to develop community safety and well-being plans that involves putting money into many things beyond the police that produce community safety and well-being. A major question around CSWB plans is, what is the role of the police in these programs? No candidate has had anything to say about what remains mostly an aspirational type of plan. One of the most important questions for all mayoral candidates is, will you take your position on the Police Services Board, the body that's meant to be overseeing all of this? Because not having mayors on boards has been shown to be basically a nonsense here in Ottawa and across the province of Ontario. Most mayors that take their position have a very important role to play on that body.
To continue off that then, Michael, several candidates in the election so far have highlighted public safety as a concern, saying people feel unsafe, and even saying, crime is increasing in Ottawa. We need to do something about this. Do the facts back that up? Is Ottawa less safe? Is it becoming less safe?
Simply no. And we often hear these types of stats thrown around before an election. There has been a bit of a blip or a rapid increase recently in gun violence and gang violence, particularly around the Byward Market. This is an anomaly. The police have backed up that interpretation with their statistics. We have to remember crime rates have been falling in Ottawa over the last couple of years, largely due to the pandemic, but they have not rebounded past to where they have been before the pandemic, except for in the area of property crime. And that has everything to do with opportunity and the ability of people to carry out property crime, with people again leaving their homes and times being tough economically.
Actually, Matt, if I could just jump in there, yeah, I think that question about is Ottawa less safe, I think it's important to ask, is it less safe for whom, right? And again, if you look at the study I just cited, right, that the low levels of trust among marginalized communities, that comes from somewhere, right? That comes from like the actions of the police that make them less safe, right? And I think as Michael mentioned also, and the OPS's own stats kind of show that overall, in terms of people's safety, like giving more money to the police doesn't actually reduce crime. So it's actually not making the place safer for everybody. But certainly for marginalized people, they're not. Not feeling safe.
I wanted to add something to that, if you don't mind, is that and I'm going to take one group of people we haven't talked about yet, but say women or people who present as women or identify as women who are victims of sexual crimes. Many times you will find that they do not even bother reporting it because they know that nothing's going to happen to it. I am not a specialist, and I'll defer to Robin and Michael on this, but I would expect that for certain groups, especially marginalized groups, people of color, women, and Indigenous people, when they feel like they have been the victims of a crime as well, they don't bother reporting it because they know, especially if it's one of those, and I don't want to have comparisons between levels of crime, but let's say a less serious quote unquote crime where nobody gets injured seriously, they feel like perhaps it's not worth their time to report it because nobody's going to believe them. Nobody's going to take them seriously. Nothing can be done because their aggressor is someone who, for instance, is a white man, and they know that nothing's going to happen to them. So you also have these stories that are happening today in the city that are making people feel less safe. But again, as Robin was saying earlier, who is it that's feeling less safe? And are they really justified in feeling that way?
Again, for me, this comes back to the Police Services Board. If you are talking about either explicit or systemic racism in policing and uneven outcomes in safety across the city, the people who are meant to be dealing with that problem, at least with respect to the police, are the employers of the police, which is the Police Services Board. We've seen in Ottawa a complete collapse of that body in the context of the Freedom Convoy. Citizens of Ottawa were massively confused as to who was responsible for what around the Freedom Convoy. That convoy did not impact all Ottawa citizens in the same way. Robin would be right to point out racialized Ottawans, non-fully physically abled people were greatly impacted by this convoy, unable to get to work, to get their essentials at pharmacies and so forth. The board is the body that was meant to be following all of this up. If we can't get this right, the answer to the question of what our police should be doing for us and what money should be going to community safety initiatives won't be answered.
Yeah. Now, Matt, I just want to add to that too. I'm glad that Michael and Bridget were pointing out how safe the city actually is, right? Because the candidates who say we need more police, they almost always cite examples of violent crime as the reason why. However, what they leave out is some of the most important points, and that is that the Ottawa police refer to calls about a violent or potentially violent crime as priority 1 calls, okay? And according to the OPS's own stats, only 1% of their calls are priority 1 calls, right? So the public is kind of justified in everybody asking, like, so what are they doing for that other 99%, right? Well, we know what they're doing, right? They're at construction sites, sitting there in their cars, they're directing traffic, and they're going to mental health calls, where even the police have said they have to get out of, right? So people are basically calling and saying, let's take some of that 99% money and put it into things that actually are proven to actually make everybody safer, like mental health, domestic violence programs, and housing.
Bridget, why do you think there is such a divide around this topic, around the role of police and of course the police budget?
Safety, feelings of safety are highly relative. And, as I said earlier, I travel a lot. I go in places where, honestly, maybe sometimes I shouldn't. I'm feeling fine doing that because I know that when I go into a place, I go in with a spirit of openness to try to understand who the people I'm talking to are. I don't go in different areas, visiting different people, thinking these people are different than me, therefore I must be afraid. So there is a certain element of that sometimes in some communities, including in Ottawa, where some people will feel that the city is changing demographically. They go to the market; it's people not like them. They're different. The people on the street are different than what they're used to, than what they remember Ottawa being. And sometimes, and I'm not saying they're not justified in feeling a little unease about the fact that so many changes have happened. But you're always afraid of the things you don't know, and you're always more afraid of the things you don't understand. And my point in that is often to say, if people were better able to talk to each other more, we would find that there's a lot less to be scared of. And that's just for feeling safe in a neighborhood. And I'm thinking particularly when you go downtown, you go to Rideau Street, around that McDonald's, or you go to the Byward Market or around the Rideau Center. Those areas typically are the ones where you feel a little bit, especially if you're not used to that kind of gritty street scene, where you might feel like, this is feeling a little less safe for me. It is not less safe for you. None of these people are dangerous, right? There's a lot of preconceptions about people who are living, who are unhoused, who are living with mental illness, who are living with other issues, multi-generational trauma. These people are not dangerous, not because they're on the street sometimes, talking to themselves that they're dangerous to you. There's a lot of that feeling of safety in the city that is relative, and it's perception, not reality. But it is still, as I say, it's relative, and people are feeling that way. And they're entitled to their feelings. They're entitled to feeling the way they are. But that doesn't make it true. That doesn't make it real. And I think that the candidates, all three of them, by the way, the prominent ones, are the front runners, are missing a golden opportunity in this election to have a dialogue and a discussion about what really they mean by safety. That for these people who are on the street, on the Rideau Center, around that McDonald's, do they feel safe? Has anybody asked them whether they feel safe in the city? They have a right to feel safe too. Why are we not talking about what they need to feel safe in order that everyone might feel like the city is more welcoming to everyone and feeling less of that, this part of the street here is a little too gritty for my taste. Maybe we need to talk about what would make everyone feel safer, not just the people who, again, are the ones, the taxpayers and the people with more of a voice in this city, which tend to be the white or white passing residents of this city.
If I could add to that, actually, I think Bridget hit on it. There's two groups. There's those who have little to no contact with the police, but say the police make them and their property feel safer. And then there's those who have far more contact with the police and say that the police make them actually less safe, right? So, for example, Black and Indigenous students are mostly part of the second group, right? And they were the ones who told the Ottawa Carleton District School Board this when the board was reviewing the school resource officer program that had police in the schools, and it led to the board ending the program. And then the divide is made wider by the fact that the people who say they support the police literally can't imagine what they do without them. But I know we're gonna touch on that a little later, but.
I think with policing, there's the technical side and then the fact that it's a lived experience as well. So very often when we talk about what's the best safety or policing plan, there's the technical design for how you deploy police and how you link them up with other agencies and how other agencies take the lead. But people also live the programs of policing and community safety as they run. So you cannot have a technical solution to that. There's no ideal formula for how you set these things up. There's the negotiated formula that gets the biggest buy-in from the widest swathes of the community. A thing behind all of this, which is so difficult, is it really falls on mayors and elected councillors to try to lead this conversation a little bit. And it's something they're very reluctant to do because when they do it, they say, oh, we're putting the politics into policing. Well, if it's experiential, it is political. So they need to lead that discussion. We need to have resources go to the police where it's demonstrated they're doing a good job in some area and to other agencies. We can't remember too, community agencies aren't all perfect. Some of them are very good, and some of them also have a history of systemic discrimination and so forth. They need to be watched as well. When you give money to any organization, you ensure that it's doing a good job in the full public interest, and they all have nice sounding names, but you pick the best ones in the community. And that's a political set of decisions that elected representatives have to lead, and they do so partially within the police services boards and within committees on council.
I'd like to touch on the Freedom Convoy briefly, just because this has been an important moment in policing in Ottawa. And Robin, do you think public opinion has shifted towards the police at all in the wake of the Freedom Convoy?
Again, it depends on who you talk to. As that study I mentioned earlier, the University of Ottawa study of criminology, obviously the opinion of marginalized folks towards the police is at all-time low. But of course, it was low before because of some police killings, right? But now, certainly after the occupation, I'm sure you obviously you speak to the even non-marginalized residents of Centertown who lived through it. Their opinions have changed for sure, right?
And not in the right direction. Like their opinions of the police from that,
No.
my opinion of the police in Ottawa has gone down because of what happened. Imagine a group of Black men on Wellington Street sitting half naked in hot tubs, drinking beer openly, which I'm pretty sure is against some kind of bylaw somewhere, and doing that for weeks at a time, yelling, making noise, and preventing people from sleeping. Do you think that would have lasted weeks? Never. We all know it.
No, also good point. And also, for sure, again, there's the view of marginalized folks has gone down because there is such a huge, like, the contrast in terms of how the police dealt with previous demonstrations led by young marginalized people compared to how they handled the convoy was just so blatant, right? That's one thing. And then the other thing that has gotten literally, I haven't heard anybody talk about this, was what led to the resignation of Peter Slowly, right? And how that whole thing was handled, right? Like the fact that, I mean, I'd like to talk to the population to see if anybody's really buying the whole kind of angry Black man narrative that was leaked by the police, right? Saying that the reason they didn't do anything for 3 weeks was because former Chief Slowly was running around verbally abusing higher management, and they were paralyzed for 3 weeks. That's essentially what they said, right? So I've talked to a lot of Black folks. No one's believing that, right? So that also has really meant that the levels of trust are low, right?
And the only way we're going to deal with all of that, we've got to have the truth come to light over the course of this fall. So hopefully the report of the Auditor General for Ottawa will be revealing. Hopefully the emergencies inquiry at the federal level, the POEC, will be revealing. That story that Peter Slowly was sort of the rogue chief who went off. I've heard this so many times whenever a chief wanted to be moved along. It's an old trope. What I would just say there is, if that was true, why didn't we hear about it in the first 2 years of his tenure? Wasn't the board his supervisor for those 2 years? Didn't they evaluate him annually? Weren't those reports made public? They were, and they were all positive. So this is very peculiar. Again, it comes down to the oversight and governance bodies doing their jobs properly. I'm picking on the board a little bit here. I would point out that other boards across Canada aren't doing a very good job either. And that has a lot to do with lack of training, lack of resources, and lack of legal advice to do what is a very difficult job in trying to push police commanders on providing information. So we've got a long way to go, and that's why you need your mayor on the police services board. The argument that you need to keep the politics off the board by not having the mayor be on this very important management body is weak, to say the best.
Just if you don't mind, Matthew, I'd like to add something Michael said about a difficult job. Like, I want to put this out there because it's easy to hit on the police. These people do a very difficult job. We're asking them to be the good guys with the guns when we need them to deal with something that's dangerous to the community or to individuals. This is a very difficult job, and I think that most police officers want to be doing a good job, and they need to be respected, treated properly, paid well, and all that. And I'm in favor of that. We're asking the police to do way too much, and we haven't talked too much. We touched briefly on the mental health calls and so on. We're asking them to do things that are way outside of what we should really have them do. But this is not to say that when we're critical of their work, this is not to say that we should just get rid of the police. Right. Certainly that's not what I am saying. And I don't think that's what the majority of people who are in favor of the defund the police movement, which is terribly named, by the way, are in favor of as well. I want police officers to be well treated, well cared for, to do the very difficult job that they have to do for us, that we're asking them to do, putting their lives on the line for ours. That's a difficult job, and they need to have the respect that goes with that job. But we still get to criticize a lot of what happens when they don't behave the way that they should, as happened during that convoy.
And on that point, there are many functions that police themselves would like to shed. When you talk to ground level police officers, they'll be the first to say 90% of what I'm asked to do really should not be within my job description. We would be happy to give a lot of these functions to other organizations and have us focus on things like crime investigation, responding to emergency calls for service, and things along that kind of core police function lines.
So then, what are some of these alternatives to police? Are these feasible in Ottawa, Robin? Like, we talk about taking some of the weight away from police so they don't have to respond to all types of calls. What are some of those alternatives?
Yeah, I'll get into some of those, but just to make the point, right? So that a lot of the folks who agree with police getting out of stuff, including the police, say yes, they should get other things. But then when you ask them, well, okay, great. So then should we cut your budgets based on like what you're not going to be doing? They don't agree with that, including the candidates, right? So a lot of the candidates talk about like getting the police out of a mental health crisis, but they don't talk about moving the budget over. So that would be like a business having a business unit where they say, okay, we're going to take away, part of what you do, but we're going to keep the same budget, right? So fiscally, it makes no sense, right? So, yeah. So no, in terms of alternatives, I mean, so the and this is obviously a perfectly it is the key question, right? What are all the alternatives if the police were not doing what they were doing? So in terms of, let's say, like mental health, right? So the organization I'm with, the Hub, and produced a report that lays out basically a complete template for like an alternative non-police mental health system that's based on international best standards and all that, right? So that's that. In terms of things like traffic, right? Clearly, even I would suspect conservatives would say that it makes no sense to have armed officers making $100,000 a year directing traffic. Like fiscally, it makes no sense, right? So things like traffic calming measures, speed cameras. But this goes back to what Michael was saying, though, in terms of that you need to make some like governance changes, right? Because what I think a lot of people don't know is that at the moment, city councilors have to pay for traffic calming measures from their own budgets, right? So it's like, well, okay, why don't we get it makes sense to move some of that $400 million budget from the police budget into things like that, right, to keep people really safe, and then things like construction sites, right, where the police. I'm sure people have seen police sitting at construction sites for. Well, I looked into this, doing what they're doing. Anyway, clearly that's not something that, again, you need an armed police officer to be doing. The safety requirement there, like get the civilian folks in doing that, and basically the bigger picture here is that it's all about it's all about reimagining public safety, right? Like Michael hit on this. Like the city has been, all cities in Ontario have been mandated to do this community safety and well-being plans because the province, to its credit, recognized that community safety is a much broader concept, right? And that's what has to happen. Is it's reimagining on a larger scale, and some of that means that you all the answers aren't there right away, but certainly what we do know is the system we currently have, and boy, did the occupation ever show this, is not working.
That's all the time we have, folks. I'd like to thank the panelists for joining us. The election is on October 24th. Keep an eye on the Ottawa Citizen and the Ottawa Sun for updates and coverage. Thank you very much.